Welcome, everybody, to our review of our trip, our Africa trip. Those of you who've been following our trip, I managed to get 19 episodes out of my expedition to South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. And of course, Jeramay joined me after I'd been on the road for just under 2 weeks, after calamitous, difficult, challenging 40 hours in transit, as Jeramay made his way from Seattle to Maun, Botswana, and I had driven from Cape Town after spending a week finishing the Landcruiser build, and we met up in Maun and went on our expedition. And our expedition, of course, was to take beautiful pictures and have a good time in Africa. So welcome, Jeramay, all the way in Seattle.
Good morning.
I have to tell you right now that you have won the prize this morning. Your lighting in your studio is beautiful. Mine is really crappy because my system failed. It just didn't work. It's this technical. So we've just had to go the easy route and use my laptop camera, which I'm sure is fine. Can you hear me clearly? That's an important question.
Yes. Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear.
Excellent. All right. So, those of you who have watched the show on YouTube, thank you for your comments and your encouragement of us to do these shows. Of course, it's what I love doing. Those of you who have downloaded the shows in 4K from our Vimeo on demand platform, thank you for your support. And of course, downloading the shows means that you can watch them in your airship, submarine, hovercraft, or troopy camper conversion. So, Jeramay, what was the highlight for you? Straight up, without thinking, highlight of the trip. What was it?
Quando.
Easy.
Such an easy. That was a layup.
Cut to now a minute scene from Quando, so you understand what he's talking about.
Coming up?
No, he's not. Two things are going on here. Another hippo coming towards us. I don't know if this camera's going to be any good.
Right, we're back. Magic of internet. So, right, we're back. Absolutely. And
I would say Quando, and then I'm gonna shout out to Alfred. If you remember, Alfred was our guide on the boat. I've thought about those 2 days we had with him a lot, actually. I actually wonder if I want to go back and do it again. Because the more I think about Alfred and that boat and what you and I did, especially in the morning, the first day, with the hippos, man, the footage we have, I think, obviously tells part of the story. I don't know how much of that everybody's going to get. We've got really good clips, but that close, we were 3-5 meters away from hippos. And then he would turn the motor off, and we would just drift next. It's just absolutely amazing. And he knew the water inside and out. So you asked my favorite spot, Quando, and then I'm going to put a comma and put Alfred's boat guide service. Was magic. I think you and I both just were a bit shocked by how close we were, but then also the amount of content we got from that was stunning.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was, of course, Camp Quando, which was the camp we had, the luxury lodge that we had stayed at for a couple of nights after our couple of nights in the Quando area, Kasane Quando area. And that best campsite, one of the, I mean, it would be a highlight if I think about my very long career. That Quando campsite is as good as they get. It was absolutely fantastic. So now, straight on to most memorable disappointment, worst part of the trip. I'm not talking about the punctures and a few things, but they were just kind of run-of-the-mill. You deal with them as they happen. But high expectation, low delivery. What's your reaction to that?
I think you covered it in the series a little bit, so I would just be a bit of a broken record if I said Etosha wasn't what we dreamed it would be, I think, overall. And I mean, that's a big generalization because it's a massive national park, and we got amazing content from there. We really did.
We did. Oh, we did.
The theme, I think, when you mentioned punctures, and the punctures for us, I mean, it's just all in a day's work. We did that. It's just not something that really messes with you if you do overland stuff, so I don't think that's a big deal. I do think, though, along those lines, the theme that you and I both, after doing, I mean, I think you were close to 9,000 Ks on that trip overall from South Africa all the way up, and maybe even more, I don't know, but
slightly less than 8.
Slightly less than 8. So I think I was approaching 5. Or right at 5,000, and the roads, without a doubt, from the minute we left the Caprivi in northern Namibia, which is, I mean, I know that I'm not supposed to say this because Namibia will find out, but the Caprivi should just be Botswana. It shouldn't be Namibia. After we left that bit and got into Namibia, the fact that the roads were just rough and rubbish and in places where they really shouldn't be, it's just somebody's siphoning money into some account somewhere, and they're not putting them into the roads. And I think for as many hours as we spent enjoying the country, man, they were rough. And it wasn't just the rough roads, the fact that there's just really no traffic control and, all these things. And I sound a bit whiny because, you don't necessarily expect it, but Namibia is not a backwater country. I mean, it's quite developed, and there's a lot going on in that country. And I think so. My impression, first time really spending a lot of time. I've been in Namibia before, but now really been in Namibia. I think the roads were a theme that we were both. We had enough. Even though everywhere we went, we found some amazing experiences. I think the roads we had just absolutely had enough by the time we were done.
And the sad part for me was that I've been to Namibia, I have lost count, never had a whinge about the roads, because they get rough at times, and certainly in the northern part, the roads have been very, very rough on previous trips. But this was the central part, the part to me, it's a case of if I've got to put up with really heavy, bad corrugations day after day after day, what is the reward? For me, the reward is I found this incredible place. There's nobody else there, and it's just beautiful, like Northern Quoker Land and things like that I absolutely love. And I'm happy about the roads. Don't worry me. They're as rough as anything. So what? But we were in the central portion, Damaraland and south of Damaraland, where you have to deal with a lot of other traffic. So to me, there's less reward. And more, you were right, by the end of it, we were kind of done because the roads had beaten it out of us. And that's not, for me, a previous experience in Namibia. It's just not that experience. It's not my experience, but it was this time. And you're right, the money's not being put back into maintaining the road.
Yeah, and I think for those of us, from me in the U.S., where we have generally very good roads, and then in some of the states over here, Oregon, for example, is just unbelievably good. They spend such good money on the roads. It's not even just the surface. I mean, the fact that there's no signage for lane changes and divisions, and the safety bit at night. If you're traveling at night, man, I tell you couldn't possibly find the road that you're supposed to be driving on half the time, because to get to the lane you're supposed to be in, it's not a lane, it's just a dirt track in the middle of the middle of the country. It was difficult to navigate even in the middle of the day because of the wind and all the things. So it sounds like I'm whining a bit about hard travel in Africa, but you do this 26, 27 straight days, and we covered a lot of ground, and we know that ground well through the Knob of Knockcliff Park and everything else. I think we have a right to kind of give it a rating, and it wasn't a great rating. But yeah. I will say, going back to your first question about highlights, Safari Drive, I know you'll bring this up, but that my suspension, my setup, my suspension and that Landcruiser were absolutely up to the task, and I have absolutely no complaints whatsoever. The air conditioning worked the entire time,
mine barely worked.
Yours barely worked.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of rubbing it in now, but the vehicle was not an issue, and even with some punctures and some things, we absolutely rattled that thing to death, and we had no issues whatsoever with the kit. And I think Safari Drive, shout out to those guys for building a vehicle that can do that and then have no challenges. It was easy, and there was no dust where there shouldn't have been dust, and I mean it was a really good vehicle experience. So while the roads were terrible, the vehicle was fantastic.
Yeah, and I think in the series I did also mention the Jens and his support of our trip, and that issue in Namibia, we couldn't get our own SIM cards. Our international SIMs weren't working in Namibia, and when we tried to buy SIMs, it would have taken us the entire day to buy a SIM. And he sent one up to Rundu of all places, and was it Oshikati?
No, it was Rundu. Yeah, it was Rundu.
Yeah. And he called us and said, it's on its way. Go to the airport tomorrow morning and it'll be there. And we did, and it was. And we had then communications again. And that is what I tried to point out in the video is that's the difference between getting a vehicle rental. Lots of quite good rental companies supplying rental vehicles in Southern Africa, to Safari Drive that supply you that, well-equipped vehicles, well-maintained vehicles, and that support. We would have had to have stood in a queue for a day as an alternative, and
I think, and there's a little story there that I don't think you made it to the edit that I think drives that point home, because Jens did manage to get the SIM on the plane, but he actually got it to the pilot, who put it in his satchel. And the satchel from the pilot went into his pocket where he sits to go with his peanut butter cups and his juicy drinks or whatever he was having. The pilot then leaves the plane in Rundu and goes to his hotel for some sleep, and leaves the SIM there and forgot completely about it. So we actually searched Rundu to find the airport, the airline office, which was a mission, as you remember. And we found a couple of young guys. I say kid, but there were a couple of young guys that were having their lunch. We kind of pulled them out of their lunch and drove him back to the Rundu airport to go into the plane, unlock the plane, climb into the cockpit, search through the pockets, and found us the SIM card. And I think the whole point being, the fact that Jens didn't just get it on a plane like in a classic mail delivery service. He was able to get it to the pilot and say, listen, these guys really need this card. And then when it came down to it, the airline, which, to be honest, I can't remember what the airline's even called. I don't think it's Namibia Air, but whatever it is. The guys were really helpful in getting that. So the pilot was a great guy for doing it. The characters at the shop that we found, and then it was actually kind of a funny multi-hour adventure that we went on. But we didn't have a choice, and frankly, had we not had that card from Jens, our trip in Namibia would have been I don't think we could have done it, actually. We needed that data so badly, and my data wouldn't work because of things, and so we used that card, and we used that card every single day for all of our nav, because all of our nav was day by day. We didn't have any real plans. So, yeah, it was good, and that's all, again, shout out to Safari Drive for that. But it was kind of a funny little bit of a chase down to get that sim.
It didn't make it to the camera because at the time I was thinking, well, yeah, but then it's just a whinge fest.
Yeah.
What we were trying to do is say, well, we've got to get this card because we need to be able to have access to the internet, but because we still need some planning to do and da 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 da. We didn't have any choice, and it wasn't fun.
But on American TV, somebody would be dying somehow, right? It would be, and now they're going to die if they don't get the sim, and then it would have been 8 episodes. It would have been,
yes.
Yeah. We just handled it.
So, your favorite photograph that you think you took, because those of you who watch the series, you've noticed there are photographs and it says available, fine art print, available, Tolua Gallery, Jeramy's photographs, ASPW.art, my photographs. And I've only put up 50% of the beautiful shots that we've kind of, we've taken. How many photographs did you take? Give me a rough
11,000 frames.
Oh my heavens! I had thought, okay, me, it was probably about 2,000 frames. So, of course, I was shooting the video, not primarily shooting stills. Primarily shooting the video for the story. You are primarily shooting stills. Of those 11,000, there are probably 25 that you probably are really proud of, and probably 15 that are ending up in your gallery. Am I right?
Yeah, you are. I mean, the amount that we shoot. I mean, there's a religious conversation that has to do with photographers, and you shoot a lot to not necessarily keep them all, but there are moments as an animal moves where you just want that perfect kind of ear position, and the hair falls just right, and the sun glints. So, it might be 100 images that really may or may not make the grade, and then you find one that really is quite amazing. I think in this trip, though, I'm going back a lot and finding more and more shots that I really, really like than I really, especially in the minute. I mean, you always go back a month later, and then a year from now, I'll go back and find another, probably 25 or 30 shots that I really, really adore and kind of fall in love with. But as it stands right now, I think I'm only just now coming off of the high of remembering every day. Now I'm looking at photos when I kind of with my coffee in the morning, and I'm finding images I didn't know I had. And now I'm finding those images almost like somebody else took them, because now I'm finding I really like them again. So the gallery, I think I've got 25 or so that I've kind of worked on and formatted and developed, not edited, but developed for the gallery. And I think there's probably 100 images that are hidden, that are gems in there, that I think I'm going to have a really good time trying to present to an audience, because I know what I saw. I just don't always remember what I saw until I go back and find these things again. So the hippo time that we had at Camp Quando was amazing. The birds were a highlight this trip, though. The birds in the Caprivi and Botswana were really, I mean, we had birds everywhere, and then we had a lot less birds when we got into Namibia. But yeah, I think the birds were just gorgeous. We really had a nice time when, where the water was. And you mentioned it in the series, there was very little water in some places. But where there was water, we saw really, really good bird life. So I had a good time with that.
You got a remarkable shot of a Malachi kingfisher, which when you got it, it was, well, should I even bother carrying? Because early on, of course, I before you had joined me, I got the shot of the giraffe, and I thought, actually, there's little point in you coming now, because I've got the shot, and it's a really nice shot. But actually, as the trip went on, I actually got other shots that I prefer some of my flamingo shots. I love some of my flamingo shots. There's a simplicity about them that I absolutely love. And then you arrive with a Malachite kingfisher. And a Malachite kingfisher, for those of you who don't know, is this big. They fly very, very fast, and they settle. And they stay in one place for a second, and then they're almost like a hummingbird when they fly. Very, very fast wing beat, and they move very, very fast through the reeds, and then they perch. And then they move, and then they perch, and then they move, and then they perch, and you got a shot of a perched Malachite kingfisher. I mean, it wasn't filling your frame, but it's magnificent. It's actually it's like some of the parrots that I see in Australia, and they're so brightly coloured. And I think, are you kidding me? You know, they're just so bonkers ridiculous in terms of their plumage, and you know, Malachite kingfisher is the same thing. So that's an incredible photograph, and very, very lucky. There's luck as well as skill in something like that. There's definitely a combination.
Well, Alfred at the camp, the guide on the boat, actually spotted it first, and I kind of honed in on it and was able to get a shot. And it was fun because I was on this little boat. We were on this little skiff with two different couples, and one was from Poland, and I don't remember where the other one was from. And there was a gentleman sitting next to me, and quick funny story about it. When we got on the boat at the first time, he had this kind of, you know, DSLR, not a mirrorless camera, and he had this kind of a kit lens, like I don't know, maybe like a 50 to 220 something or whatever. Okay. And he was very happy about it, this camera. And I had already loaded my camera kind of on the seat next to me, and I had hidden it down here under my jacket so he couldn't see it.
And a lens,
and its lens is, yeah, it's a 600, so, and it's, you know, 5.6, and it's kind of a bananas kind of, you know, it's a proper birding lens. And so as we were taking photos all the way on this trip that evening, it was an evening trip, he was trying to get shots with his kit, and he was really proud. Occasionally he would get kind of a silhouette of a bird flying away or half of a tail or something, and he was really excited. And I was doing my own thing, and I had this big lens, and his wife leans up and says, "We need to get you a camera like that." And I wasn't showing him any of my images because it's just mean, because he's got this little kind of cute little camera thing. And
never stopped you before.
Yeah, and so the Malachite kingfisher makes its appearance, and I just absolutely nailed that shot. It's a tack sharp shot of a Malachite kingfisher. And he asked me, he says, "Can I see the picture you got?" And I felt terrible. I'm like, I don't think I should show this guy this picture of this cow, because it might be the best picture I've taken in this entire trip. So he saw it in the viewfinder, in the back of on the display in the back of the camera, and then he looked in the lens and looked at it, and he just handed my camera back and says, "I don't want to see any more of your pictures." So his wife looked at it and she goes, "Honey, why don't you have a picture like that?" Anyway, they were great sports about it, and you know, it was fun to share that, finding that with other people. But man, that was a good shot, and I really wanted to not tell you about it. I really wanted to just completely play it down when I came back and told you that I got this picture, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't keep a straight face long enough to tell you that I got this picture. I tried, I really did, and it didn't work.
So I spent a year, of course, in 1991 in the Okavango trying to photograph a Malachite kingfisher. I didn't get one. It was a case of, there it is, where? I don't know. And that was what happens. They move so fast. So you were very, very lucky. And of course, the guides have incredible eyesight. They see through things. They see beyond things. They're amazing to work with. So is that might be your best picture, but is that your favorite?
I don't think it was my favorite. I think the composition it's a Malachite kingfisher in the reeds, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and it is what it is. It's just an amazing shot. However, and I just over the moon that I got it. I think some of the composition that we had, you mentioned the flamingos. You know, I've got some flamingo shots that I'm really proud of. I have some giraffe stuff that I'm proud of, some rhino stuff that I'm proud of. I think maybe interestingly enough, and it sounds kind of pedestrian, but I think maybe one of my favorite shots might be a zebra this year. There was some lighting we had at Olifantsros in Etosha that was...
Oh, that evening light?
That evening light was just, I mean, your video
light?
footage really captures it well, because if everybody wonders, that's what it looked like. It was, you know, not edited, it's just that golden, beautiful golden red light.
Absolutely. I don't think I edited this color at all on the video. I might have tweaked the contrast up very, very slightly, but it's just beautiful.
I think we both got a lot of really good, you know, zebra shots that I think I really, really love. But I think the probably the most fun we had was waking up that morning on Walvis Bay on the coast and finding that crazy cormorant scene that we experienced, and shooting those flamingos for a few hours. We had nowhere we had to be, and we just went absolutely mad shooting. I had thousands of frames of those guys, and I think as I go back and look at them now, I'm finding more and more things that I really like: the pelicans and the cormorants. And there was like 4 different kinds of cormorants in that I've now looked through my pictures and found. So a feature. And then I think in capturing the photos, I've got some hippo photos that probably I'm going to have a really, really hard time beating in my future hippo work, because one, being that close to those hippos, as you and I both know, we should probably have a disclaimer, but don't get that close to hippos ever. But the detail that I was able to get on my hippo shots, I am absolutely over the moon, and I'm still finding shots that, looking at hippos in different ways, I mean, it's amazing to see them play and open their mouths and, you know, the big teeth and all the things, but their expressions and their familial interactions with the young ones and all that is just, it's an amazing animal to watch, not just because of its size and its power, but it's just, it actually has a very cartoon aspect to it. And to be that close to them, where the whiskers are all kind of glistening and, you know, you get all these shades of gray on their faces and their skin. It's just I think that was probably the most fun, was that hippo session that we had in Quando. Yeah.
What actually happened in Walvis, it was the ideal situation that was planned when I planned the original expedition. It was Zambia and Malawi, and I left large sections where we would actually had nowhere to go for 4 days, and we were camped all on a lodge near a river or a lake to photograph the birds. And of course, because of the flooding in Dubai, which stopped your trip, which postponed your trip by, I think, 5 days or so, and then the flooding in Malawi, which most of the camps were closed, so we couldn't do it. That was the situation that I had tried to plan. Now we had to change that. And a lot of Namibia is very dry, very open, it's very beautiful, but not really conducive to wildlife photography. If I was going to tell anybody, you know, if you want to go and photograph wildlife, well, you go to Botswana and you go to Zimbabwe and you go to Zambia. You don't go to Namibia, apart from perhaps Etosha and some of the areas around Etosha and Caprivi. But as you say, Caprivi isn't mentally part of Namibia. Namibia is Namib Desert, it's yellow, and it's very different. And yet, of all of the 2 places that we got the best bird shots was Quando and Walvis, both in Namibia. You know, and I think that only of all of the shooting, because I don't have a crop in my head. I imagine, tell me if you're right, when you're photographing something, your mind is going, and it's busy cropping. Then when you're in the edit, you're thinking, I can, and then you crop, and then you get an image. I don't do that because I'm filming for video. I'm 16:9. My brain is 16:9. That's how I work, and I need a composition. So I've taken a lot of photographs which are quite nice, but without a crop, they're no good at all. But I have to somehow, and I went back to my Walvis Bay pictures. I went back to my flamingo pictures, and I said, crop, go in there and crop, start cropping, and actually came up with 4 or 5 images that I hadn't actually even seen, because the compositions were wrong. But within that big 60 megapixel frame, there was a beautiful composition. And so I am still having to work hard at finding natural composition in the edit. I do it while filming video. It's a different discipline, completely different discipline with video when compared to stills. And the Pelican, the flamingo shoot was the only shoot that we did on our entire trip where I prefer my still pictures to yours. It's the only, the rest of it, your pictures eclipsed mine, but for the flamingos. And I think my favorite picture is my pair of flamingos. And it's not that heavily cropped, but it is cropped. But that to me is my favorite picture. And I took some cues from some of your pictures. I wiped out the background completely. The background is just clean, and there's just these birds standing alone, and it's not heavily edited, but it is cleaned and polished, which you're very good at getting your pictures to be more impactful.
It's interesting you mentioned that, and I've seen some of your. It's fun to have. We were side by side in different parts of the beach and shooting the exact same animals in some cases. And I think about cropping as I shoot all the time. In fact, maybe it's the opposite, where video you're trying to get everything in the frame that you need because you've got to do all the things the rules that you need to do to establish the shot and how your framing is happening. And then I'm basically downplaying all the other stuff in the frame that I don't want as I'm shooting, knowing that I'm only going to really care about just a particular kind of animal. You and I talked about this when we were traveling, about this notion of almost animal portraiture, where I'm shooting with a long lens and I'm getting into their space from a distance and kind of getting these detail in their eyes and their beak and kind of the imperfections. And so I'm always thinking about how can I get a close up to show what the animal's like, with feathers and coloring and texture and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned about Namibia, though. Everything from it is a distance. The scale in Namibia is massive. So there's no, in Botswana, Zimbabwe, you're kind of in with them in the bush, or something close. And I think we're closer in general, because the animals are closer in the vegetation. Whereas in Namibia, if you see an ostrich, it's 3 kilometers away, and you're kind of running through the desert. You're like, well, that's a great shot of an ostrich if you can kind of tell what it is. And we were close enough to flamingos to get some really, really cool shots. I think, by the way, editing or developing those shots with the flamingos, there was if you remember, the tide had gone out, and there was a sandbar in the middle, and there was a bit of an island, and there was water behind that, and then the horizon was behind that with another sandbar, and then the horizon was behind that. So what you ended up with these layers of horizon lines.
Beautiful.
They were gorgeous, but they also
beautiful.
They were also not all straight, because the sandbars would kind of, in frame, the sandbars would kind of taper off in each direction. Yeah. So you'd end up with these kind of horizon shots where you're trying to balance the horizon, and if you got it right, the other one was off and the other one was off. So it was fun to try and find a way to show the animal that we saw in a way that was comfortable to kind of look at, because the scale was massive. I mean, I was shooting close up, and then I think a lot of times you were shooting with a 1635 for wide angle, then you were shooting with your 7200 for some of the other stuff. And I found it really fun to get in close in that big space and just kind of crop all these different little stories, kind of out. And it was a good exercise, because I don't think I'd really spent time shooting quite like that before. A lot of fun.
With the scene at Walvis, none of your pictures and none of my pictures of the cormorants were really striking, because it was just this massive cormorants and this massive movement. But for video, I got probably the best video wildlife shot of my entire career. I shot it at 50 frames per second, and all the cormorants came in from the right. And because of course with video, if you move the camera, it has to be motivated, otherwise don't move the camera. So I'm now motivated because I'm following all the birds, and they're coming towards the camera. So the whole frame is just this massive movement. Shot it at 50 frames per second, slowed down to 25, is just enough. That half speed is just enough to see the texture and the movement. It's wonderful. And the other cormorants, which were, I think, the white-bellied cormorants, came in behind them and started flying from left to right. So as I was moving with the birds, in the frame came a whole lot of birds from the left, and then I started moving back again. Now, normally, if you were to shoot a frame and you were to go left and, you know, to the right, and then pan to the left and then pan back, it would be never do that. But because I was following the birds and this was motivated, it's, as I said, I think one of the best wildlife shots I've ever shot. And while I was shooting it, I was saying to myself, yeah, I'm at the right f-stop, I'm at the right shutter speed, and I had it on the tripod, on the proper video head, and at the end of it, I thought, nothing went wrong. There was nothing, because so often you get a magnificent thing and it's, there was a bump, there was a jolt, just the wrong, and it's difficult. Okay. So there are lots of things working against you to get a really beautiful shot. And at the end of that shot, there was nothing working against me. Everything worked. Even the microphone picked up the magnificent sounds of the gulls and the cormorants and everything all mixed together to make this. And the soundtrack is the natural soundtrack. I didn't add anything to it. And but stills, none of our, do you have any stills of those cormorants?
No, they were so far away too.
In love with?
And they weren't, I mean, flamingos are so easy. They're so photogenic. It's kind of ridiculous. I did begin to go through frame by frame some of the images I got that were really nice. They're not, I think cormorants get a bad rap. They're not all that photogenic unless you get a really nice close-up on their eyes. Their eyes are absolutely beautiful. Cormorants have these amazing eyes. Different species have different colors. There are some of the big golden-breasted ones, and I have to look up the name, but they're big. They're much bigger than the other ones. And I have some that were kind of symmetrical in frame that were flapping in the wind, and I think are worth spending some time with. I have them marked in my Lightroom catalog, and I think they may not be something that that I necessarily put on the wall, but it's neat to see them in the context of all those other birds. So no, they were hard. It was hard to get them by themselves because they were kind of busy and they weren't really kind of posing like all the flamingos do so well. The last part about the flamingos that was interesting for me in context is I've seen flamingos, in Florida in the U.S. That's a pretty common. Flamingo's kind of the mascot of the Floridian waterscape, and we were in Luderitz and seeing flamingos in the breakers on the point in big waves, out fishing alongside penguins. Which the African penguins are out there, and seeing flamingos in that context was amazing because normally I see them kind of wading in ponds and shallow water and they're picking at fish and things, but to see them in big water was pretty amazing. And alongside the penguins in just a very remote place. You didn't go, but I took a boat out to the point and. Got some additional flamingo shots with a number of other birds out there too. There were quite a bit of birds, and I got some interesting penguin shots. And it was neat to see penguins, and I didn't have to go to Antarctica to do it. Although we're pretty far south and on the Atlantic down there, but it was a pretty cool experience to see them in that context.
Our drive home from after we had enjoyed Balfus, we then went back into the desert and overnight, and you saw a very rare animal called the brown hyena at Mirabib in the Nama Malkov Park. So I have never been able to photograph well a brown hyena. I still haven't. But it was there in the frame, and you called it looks like a mop walking around. Very lucky to see that. Which is exactly what it is. And it's a scavenging mop. It scavenges, and they're solitary, and they're very difficult to, and it was a rare treat to actually see one. But then, of course, we went to the quiver tree forest. Now, there are two photographs that in my collection that I really love. One was at the railway station on the way to Luderitz, the mining town, where we stopped at that derelict railway station, and I shot some pictures of that tree. In fact, there are 3 pictures on my gallery. of that tree. It's naturally photogenic. It's probably been photographed 100,000 times, but it was because we had time, and I sat down and I wanted a wide shot of that tree, and it was a nice image, but it didn't have any movement to it. So, and I noticed at the bottom of the tree there was the grass kind of blowing in the wind. So I just cranked the f-stop. By the way, that 16 to 35 millimeter lens at f/22 is soft. It's soft. Yeah. My f/22 images are not sharp, but luckily with that, I went click, 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 and I closed it. And so in other words, slowed the shutter speed and had an ND filter on it, and showed that the shutter speed was probably at 20/30th of a second, but the grass is moving because of the wind. And that to me has made one of my favorite photographs because of that blowing grass and at just the right f-stop. Because I'd never done a trip with that lens, not the new version. And at 22, it's fine for video. It looks great. For stills on the A7R, it's not sharp. Not sharp at 22. Start down all that way.
Yeah.
Closed down all that way. And then we went to the quiver tree forest. I kind of did the same thing again, because we were both photographing the quiver trees, and having seen 1,000 photographs of quiver trees, realized that in fact to try and get something a little unusual was going to be a stretch. So I just found one that had fallen down and sat behind it and waited for the sun. Probably my second favorite photograph of the entire trip. Again, no movement this time, but there was a gap between the rocks, the grass, the tree, and the sun was behind a cloud. And I sat there and I propped it on a rock on the ground, and I just waited. And as the sun passed through, I just went bang, 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 and I just, every 4 seconds, 5 seconds or so, I hit the shutter again, because that the one moment where that, and that to me is wonderful, because you're taking us a moment in time, an instant in time, 1/100th of a second in time, and that's what it was at that moment. It felt like that for me. I probably took 40 pictures, and the one that, again, one of my favorite photographs, and all it was being patient, having the time to sit and wait, the right time of day, and sitting and waiting. And that to me was what I love about taking pictures, because at the end of it, that walk we took, and we shot dozens of pictures. One of them was, hey, that was worth it. It's like fishing.
Yeah, your perspectives in the quiver tree forest were, you've really got some shots I really enjoy because of your perspective. You were getting down, not just getting low and taking a low shot, but what you have in focus, and kind of, because that was the challenge we gave ourselves, was how do we do this? I mean, anybody can kind of walk through there and take a picture of a quiver tree of the, Kookaburra forest and Kookaburra, yeah, whatever they're called, yeah.
Kookaburra, yeah.
Yeah, and we had the time. We took a couple of parts of 2 days to spend, trying to look at them differently. We had an amazing sky that evening. The cloud formations were amazing. We had some really nice diffused light. It was kind of a bit overcast. It wasn't all that hot. It was great. And then we had an evening walk, and we had a good starry night. I mean, it was a really good, and not a lot of pressure, not a lot of traffic. So we kind of had the place to ourselves. So it actually worked out. It worked out pretty good. I shot with infrared a lot in the forest there, which was new, because I really hadn't used that camera a whole lot up to that point, because I brought the converted A7R3 converted to infrared with me. And I'm really, really enjoying the shots that I got there, because the textures and the clarity of that. I was shooting with the 1635 Mark II as well, and the 70-200. But the clarity I got in infrared was just bananas. It's just like a whole nother world. It just really, really was. So I've actually got some shots of the weavers, the little weaver birds.
Yes.
On some of the quiver trees in infrared, converted to black and white. So it's a bit of a process that I just really like. I just really love it. And I found that developing those has been a lot of fun, because these little weavers are such, cute little characters. And you don't often shoot a lot of birds in black and white, or at least I don't, because they're so colorful and beautiful. The weavers aren't super colorful, but the contrast of them on these white bark trees in infrared is just, it's just stunning. So, yeah, the quiver tree thing was, I think it pushed me a bit to figure that out, though, to figure out what is it we're looking at and how can we, I feel like for me it was a study in textures. The quiver trees are a study in textures. They're all about the little spiny bits on the edges of the leaves that look like aloe vera plants, and the high contrast bark, and it's just an amazing, weird, because it's not really a tree, is it? It'd be the equivalent of a Joshua tree maybe in California. It would be something like that, and it's just this kind of cactusy, succulenty big thing that's so unique. And I've got some images from there that I think are just odd enough to be, very, to my eye, really, really pleasing to see, just because it's so different, and you just don't see things like that very often. That was fun. That was a fun session we had.
It was very good. So, you've watched have you watched the episodes? You have. Funniest moment?
Funniest moment. Usually it's when you and I are giving each other a hard time as we're traveling. I think funniest moment, probably watching you rant about people in Natasha driving too fast and doing a bad French accent.
Get to the waterhole as quickly as I can. Do it now and f*** you all.
Oh, you're right. I did. I swore on camera. Did I swear on camera, or did I do a beep? I think I did a beep.
I think you did a swear, but it was good.
Get to the waterhole and F you all. Yes. We're getting very annoyed by very, very rude French tourists.
Yeah, and we were pretty ruthless on our review of Okakweu as well. As we made fun of that least worst, most worst kind of thing that we were sitting in. Sitting in the driveway.
Gwyn got a good chuckle on that when you were talking about this. Is as bad as it is, it's actually cheap.
When you look at what it costs for this place, which in Namibian dollars is ridiculous, it's still less money than it would cost for something equally as bad in either one of our countries.
So actually, it's okay because it's cheap.
It's super cheap.
So this bad experience is cheap, so it's not as bad as it. She had a good laugh about that, which actually is very, very true. Because Namibia is a really good bang for your buck if you're traveling from overseas. Value-wise, it's really good, but for me, Etosha was redeemed by the private camp. What was it called? Onguma,
yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
That was really nice.
That was gorgeous. Yeah.
And Olifantsrus, which I thought as a public campsite, it is what it is, was fantastic. And the waterhole, I loved that because there were no tour buses and not terribly busy. There were other people around, but it was, and for me, Etosha redeemed itself because of those two camps. And Okakweu was as we know, big disappointment. Although some of those images at the waterhole, which was the reason I took you there, was because of the waterhole.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that waterhole was absolutely worth the. Remember the two young ladies that we met at Namwe Island in. We were still in the Caprivia. It's at the Katima Malilo area somewhere over there. And they had told us that they had seen quite a few rhinos at Okakweu waterhole, so we had kind of made that part of our trip to get out there. And in fact, I was just showing my wife the other night the Okakweu night cam of that watering hole, because there's a live cam on that all the time, so you can kind of see when they come and go. And that was, I've got I'm doing some work now on some giraffe photos in the morning. There was a morning session. I went kind of early and got a good spot and, took some shots. And there was a whole great, beautiful family there of just getting a drink in the morning. And it's going to be a really good, I've got probably a dozen images that I'm really, really proud of from Okakweo as well.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a spoiler or not. You just reminded me, we were talking about Walvis, and we went down to Luderitz, and you're probably, I'm assuming, and I haven't seen this video, maybe I've not got that far down the line yet, or you haven't given me a thing for it, but somebody amazing in Luderitz, and it was probably just maybe a normal interaction, but it was still one of the highlights of the trip for me. It was meeting Wendy in Luderitz. And
it's the end of the final episode.
Okay. And I think if Wendy sees this video, thank you very much for the laundry, Wendy. But I think
good funny scene. It's humorous, and she's a great sport, and it was a lovely interaction.
It was so refreshing to find someone like that. That just a person like us who's making their way and was so accommodating and so hospitable. Her and her mother and her son. It was just a really nice moment. And I actually, you asked me before some of my favorite moments. I think that actually is in the top 5 moments of the trip. And it wasn't wildlife and it wasn't taking pictures. It was just having a Coke with Wendy and her family. And it was also nice to have our laundry because we hadn't had laundry in about a week. So that was good. So it was a nice top off. But how that whole thing kind of came about was really, really nice. And I just shout out to Wendy for helping us out. And what a really nice piece of the trip on that too.
Mm-hmm. So maybe what I should do, because all those episodes, including that last one, they're not public at the moment we're recording this, but the video on demand, they are available. So you haven't seen that because it's the last episode. You've probably not seen the last few. But anyway, maybe I should run this just before that last episode as a preempt to the final episode. Some of the best pictures we took on the entire trip, on that from Marabib to Luderitz to the Coca Forest, and of course Luderitz is where we had our laundry done. That's the final episode. Maybe I should release this as a preempt to that a nice little moment that kind of ended the trip on a very, very nice way. In a very nice way. Yeah, as you say, not about wildlife, not about 4x4s, it was about just meeting a local person that, and she was grateful for a little bit of business we gave her to do our washing. And she wasn't the laundromat we were looking for.
Yeah.
She was the laundromat's next door neighbor.
Yeah.
And the laundromat wasn't there, so she said, well, I'll do your washing for you. And she seemed nice, so we said, okay. So we gave her our clothing and went back 2.5, 3 hours later and had a Coke with her family. It was lovely. It was really nice. Yeah. I suppose we should wrap this up now, but I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments about the idea that we include in our trips photography and photograph and the inspiration of picture taking, because I haven't really done it much before, a bit on my shows. It's all about four-wheel drive, but this to me is a wonderful appendix. What's the name? What's the word? Addition.
Appendix or an addition. Yeah.
No, I've had my appendix out, so it's not one of those. but I think it's it gave me a purpose. It really gave me a purpose, and another purpose for making the show and doing the trip. Comments about it.
Yeah, we would love to know, because we have very different takes. You and I have different takes, and every photographer. I mean, the amount of good photography in that part of the world is stunning. I mean, really, really stunning, and we all see things differently. And I think what really is fulfilling is to have an image that someone puts on their wall. It's amazing in whatever format. And the gallery we both are using has the ability to put those things on metal and on canvas and on wood and paper and all kinds of things. A lot of these shots with the deep colors and the vibrancy work really well on metal. It's a higher end print. It's amazing. I think, that being said, I love to see people put it on their wall, but with our focus on our own work, when you want to put it on your own wall, it really makes you feel like, man, I want to go do that again. And I think we came back. I know you and I both did. We came back with images that we want to put on our own wall, that we want to show off to our family, and just that we continue to walk by and go, wow, I remember that shot, and I remember why I liked it so much. And we got a lot of those on this trip. It wasn't just a place, but we were set up for it. We had the right kit, and we took the time. We took the time to do it. I think the next time we go, we'll spend more time, even less time driving and more time sitting. We had to make changes this year, but yeah, we got some amazing shots that I think people are really going to enjoy if they take a look at the gallery. That really are, and there's a story to every one. I think I need to do a better job of telling the story on a gallery, because those images and where they came from and what they were doing, I think, is probably just as interesting to people. But they can tell us in the comments what do they think about them.
To wrap it up, I know a lot of people are going to be asking about the car. And what happened with that low range? Those of you who haven't watched the show, I basically got stuck, and the first time I actually got stuck is because I was being lazy, and I wasn't in 4-wheel drive, and because most of it was a 2-wheel drive track, and I actually should have. I know I should have been in 4-wheel drive. I know this. I'm the last person you need to tell this to. And yet I was lazy. I was in bloody 2-wheel drive. I come around a corner, and the next thing, instead of being able to just go bang into a gear, which I tried to do, and the car went and stopped. If I'd been 4-wheel drive, I promise you it would have just gone through. So then I kicked myself, and I think I said to you that I'm getting into bad habits. And then you pulled me out. It was an easy recovery. And then I think it was the following morning, we were going through a little sightseeing place. It's viewing point or something, which wasn't on the river. It was away from the river, but we had time. We followed it. Very, very heavy sand. And I think you called onto the radio and you said, this is really tough. And I think I called you back and said, too late, mate. And I was in 4-wheel drive. And I couldn't get it into low range. And then we tried a few things and they failed. And then I pulled out the max tracks and thought, let's do it properly, and pulled out but we still needed to get it into low range. The problem was a small switch. It's this big. And what it does is that as you go into low range, it switches, it's a little indent switch, it switches a circuit, closes a circuit to enable the electrical differential locks to be engaged. With a Landcruiser, with that particular Landcruiser, you cannot lock a diff in high range. And they do that for safety. You want a diff lock, you go into low range. Otherwise, you're going to start damaging things. And so, strangely enough, on that particular cruiser, I could lock a diff without it going into low range, which actually should not have been the case, because this little switch, it had been worn down, not through use, but through the worn gearbox. And now, because it was worn down, as you put it into low range, this little thing does kind of it's an indent switch, but it kind of does this. And because it had been worn down, it couldn't push that switch in. The switch was stopping the lever from going all the way into low range. It would go the first part, and I remember saying to you, I can go the first part, but I won't go gonk. That last little thunk in low range is that last little think that was the problem. So nothing we could have done short of dismantling the gearbox, I don't believe. We might, had we known exactly, we could have removed that switch. We could have. But how do you know? So, and you managed to force it into low range, and we got out of that. But you remember during the early part of the trip, I decided that we should go and do the sand sea of the Namib. And I met a guide, and then it was a bit of negotiation. Then we met another guide, and then they said, well, if you're going to come with us, you're going to need to get permission to film. And it started becoming really complicated. And eventually I said, you need time to arrange this. We don't have the time. You need time. It has to be prearranged. Luckily, that actually worked out better, because I would have not survived a desert trip with the engine at producing such little power and no low range to get myself out of difficulty. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, in heavy sand, you're using mostly high range, which is true. You need the low range sometimes, and where it's critical and really difficult, you need low range.
Well, and
high range, high gears and low range.
You had a double problem is that with as many miles as you had on your motor, you didn't have the power in high range to do all the high range things anyway. You would have you absolutely had no power until you were in a high enough rev that you would have been just, screaming. And even then you didn't have the power. So, and I couldn't just walk alongside you with a canvas strap pulling your linkage over for you all the time. So that wouldn't, it probably would have, it might have worked, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
But, there was no way. Your vehicle could not have done it. It just could not have done it. I mean, I had the 2022, 70 series. It was great that I got from Safari Drive, and it had the power. They're such underpowered vehicles anyway. Everybody knows that about Landcruisers. They're just ridiculous. But you need what they can do, and you need all of it to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I know that the show doesn't always convey, the soft sand and the slope and all that kind of stuff. But it's like powder. It's like talcum powder. It doesn't, if you don't have that power, you can't go anywhere. And we would have, it's a good thing we didn't even try to do that. And you're right, it wasn't coming together anyway. But we really had no business trying. We didn't do it, which is good. And by the end of the trip, I don't know, I'm assuming you have this in the episodes, but by the end of the trip, I think the troopy was well and truly telling us, thank you, but no thank you. And we would have had to have left it somewhere on a dune.
It was saying, I'm done. Yeah. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been nice. I'm done. And that's what happened when eventually went back to Windhoek, and I had an offer. I'll drive it down to Cape Town for you, free of charge. I said, no, it's too dangerous. If the ambience are high, you are not going to be able to overtake trucks, and you're going to need to overtake trucks, and it's dangerous. It's just not a safe car. So I thought better of it. It would not be a kind thing to do to say, yeah, it's fine, take it down.
And not because of the build. I mean, obviously, and you've already said this, it wasn't because of the build not being safe. It was because it just doesn't have any power anymore. It's time. I watched most of the fuel and combustion of your cylinders coming out your tailpipe for the better part of 5,000 Ks. And by the end of it, I think most of your compression was coming out the back, not going to the fuel.
Yes, you could see every time I changed down.
Every time. Yeah, it was just black smoke. It was just inefficient. And your fuel consumption got worse and worse over the trip. And
it did. Got worse.
Yeah, but what a nice last hurrah it got. It got a true, we did make it work hard for its. And I'm assuming you'll have a story on what's going on now with it. But it was, it got us back to Windhoek, which was nice.
Yeah. The vehicle, when I left Cape Town, was performing like a 1HZ should. It was a little bit underpowered, but it was not terrible. It was 1HZ with a fairly heavy load. And then the more we got onto the trip, it deteriorated slowly, but a little bit at a time. There was a time when trying to get through traffic, trying to accelerate through traffic, going through one of the towns one morning, I was thinking, there's something majorly wrong with this car. And it had gone from being absolutely fine, not great, but fine, to it's terrible. And the fuel consumption got worse and worse, and it started off at about 17 liters per 100 k's, and it ended up at times over 20 liters per 100 k's. And I think the average was 19 for the trip. Very, very high. Should have been 13.
It looked good doing it, though.
It looked good. It looked good doing it.
It did.
Yeah.
It was a very good-looking troopy.
Yeah. So those of you who are watching the series now, of course, keep watching, because we're doing an engine transplant. It's all go. It is being supported by Terrain Tamer, supplying all the parts they can for a 1HD FTE motor, which is the multi-valve 4.2 straight 6 turbocharged. We have a donor engine that Hubert Sneeman is donating to the project, or one of his clients is. A donated gearbox. It's all fortuitous. It all works out in the end. The guys who messed up with the gearbox, and I really don't blame them, because they're a lovely bunch of guys, and whether it was an oversight or what, at the end of the day, I actually wasn't ticked with them. I wasn't, for whatever reason, we couldn't get into their range. Hey, so, and because they're very good at what they do. Snowman's have used them for years and years and years.
And they were really helpful to us.
Comebacks.
Yeah, they were really helpful to us when we reached out to them on the road. They sent us pictures and ideas and
videos.
Yeah, it was
absolutely
amazing.
Check this, check that. By the time we had received those videos, we had recovered ourselves, because we had no cell signal at the time at all for those few days. But anyway, it was okay. Well, if we get to it, if we get a chance and need it, we might get under the car and try and fix it, which we never did. But of course, they're saying now, we're building this new car and we've got this new gearbox. It's a completely different gearbox, because that gearbox built for the 1AZ would be torn to shreds by the multi-valve. So it's not suitable. But the gearbox is suitable, is actually used in the 4.5 petrol motor gearbox. It's one of the strongest gearboxes ever fitted to a Landcruiser. If they build these hyper fast turbo and supercharged high ace racers, they use that gearbox, because it's on almost standard, because it's so strong. So that gearbox has been donated, but it needs a rebuild. So they're going to be doing a rebuild. And I'm going to have to pay a reasonable amount, because there are it's quite a specialist, and Terrain Tamer can't supply all the spares that we will need for the rebuild, but a fair proportion that they will be able to supply, which they of course will. And Hubert supplying the engine and all the labor as part of his, because he loves the publicity. And I'm going to have what I've always regarded as probably the best motor ever to be fitted to a troop carrier. That multi-valve motor is amazing. It's incredible at low RPM, and it's the old 4.2 tractor motor, long stroke, 4.6 cylinder long stroke, but with a big fat turbocharger on it. They're incredible engines. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's happening this year and early part of next year. Alucab are coming to town with their Gen 3 Hercules, which they're going to be fitting that. So I'll have the whole, so hey, eat your heart out. I'm going to have, the perfect troopy, the best engine. And the whole combo is going to be absolutely terrific. So for another trip in April 25, April 25, we're doing, yeah. So I don't know if you're going to be able to make it for April 25.
I don't know. I'd sure like to. So keep me abreast of things. We'll hopefully the once in every 75 year, 100 year, 200 year, whatever the storm that sunk Dubai when I was trying to get there last time doesn't happen again. And maybe we'll take a hard right and go where we planned to go this last time. And instead of we went left, next time let's go right and see what else we can find. It was fun.
I'm planning Zimbabwe. I'm planning a major thing through Zimbabwe to explore an area that you and I have actually been to, the southern border of Lake Kariba, Matusabana, Chizaruewa. We drove through it. We didn't explore it. I want to go there and explore it. And it is possible that Kate and Cam will be with us too. And So the first part, I'm doing a solo trip through Botswana again, like that kind of stuff, and then everybody will join up probably and join up in probably Vic Falls, and then do Hwangi, go and see Edward in Hwangi, our friend Edward, and who helped us out in 2018, and then to drive to Kariba, and then go to the Zambian side of Lake Kariba. Another houseboat, whatever.
Yeah, we definitely have to look into the boat thing again, because what a nice way to see the coast.
Amazing.
And Michael, the chef, was an amazing addition to our trip as well. Waking up to eggs on toast from that guy, whew, that was good.
I mean, and what is amazing about these things is it's a rudimentary boat. It's comfortable. There's nothing flashy about it, but it's very comfortable. It's well equipped. The little staterooms are very comfortable, and the kitchen is so ordinary. I mean, it's just a bench with a couple of pots, and it is so as basic as you can imagine. But the food that these guys prepare is fabulous.
They do a great job.
Honestly, it's so good, and to me, it's just it's a tribute to the ability to make food. Because they barely have a stove that works, and yet this food is fantastic. Yeah, so Kariba houseboat is got to take the family on a Kariba houseboat.
Yeah.
Right, Jeramay.
Thank you. It was fun.
Until next time, everybody. Hey, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
All right.
Bye for now.
Bye.